Hey y'all, Broderick here, and welcome to the OAnalysis for Part 1, Episode 4, titled Away. There was a bit of a delay from my last video, as I had a computer issue that needed addressing. Anyways, the script for this episode was probably the most difficult to write so far, and some of the plot points are going to be difficult to discuss without giving away any spoilers. Regardless, let's get into this. The episode opens with Prairie opening her eyes in what looks like a dried-up lagoon. Realizing both that she can see and that she's dead for the second time, she rubs her eyes and looks around. She makes her way to a small orange shack in the distance. As she enters, we see it's the same place she went when she died as a child, and the same old woman, Katoon, sits in the middle. Katoon tells Prairie that she can stay with her in painless peace,
But as things are, you never escape.
She offers Prairie a choice. She can either stay and be with her father and Katoon for eternity, or she can accept a gift from Katoon, a bird that she needs to swallow, that will show her a form of travel unknown by humans. After making the choice to return, Katoon pushes back her shawl to reveal a white feathered wing. She also tells Prairie,
All 5 of you must work together as one to avert a great evil.
even though there's only 4 of them in Hap's basement. When Prairie asks her if they're alike, Katoon replies with,
No. You are the original.
As Prairie swallows the seed of light, as Katoon calls it, we cut to a feather floating into Prairie's shoes and the sound of a heartbeat. As Prairie wakes up and goes to move, Hap places an ice pack on the back of her head. He tells her that she was unresponsive for 7 minutes and that she's the only non-scientific death he's ever had. Also,
You're the only subject who has ever challenged me, extracted concessions, tried to escape.
so he did know about Prairie stealing things. After telling her he can't let her go, Hap injects Prairie with something, and we cut to black. Back in the cage, Prairie wakes up with a jolt. She tells the others that instead of trying to get out, they need to try and stay awake during Hap's experiments.
I think she got brain damage.
As she gets up and cleans her face, she makes a bold declaration. They're not lost, unloved, or unlucky.
We're angels.
Naturally, Scott and Homer think she's nuts, but Rachel asks what her proof is. Rachel is because she hid August's death from Prairie until she was ready. Scott because he talks to his plants to help them grow without sun. As for Homer,
Because your eyes are green, clear, as honest as you are. Because I can see.
back in the present, Steve and Jesse head home after walking Betty to her car. We follow Jesse to get a taste of what his home life is like. As far as we can tell, it's just him and his older sister, who's sitting in the living room watching Stranger Things and smoking pot. I initially saw this as just 2 kids sitting in the living room smoking pot alone, but the actress was 29 when this role was shot, so...
What do I know? Yeah.
The next day, Betty finally meets with a lawyer handling her brother's estate. Her twin brother, Theo, was a drug addict that was forced into rehab due to a police tip given by Betty herself. It's unclear whether he OD'd or committed suicide, but regardless, Betty is receiving a check for $50,000 from her brother's life insurance policy. Betty asks Steve and Jesse to help her collect her brother's things from the rehab facility. I touched on this in the previous episode, but I like how Steve forces Jesse to sit in the middle seat so Betty doesn't get squeezed. This is probably the first time we see Steve show respect for somebody older than him. At the rehab facility, Steve, Jesse, and Betty, affectionately called BBA by Steve and the group going forward, are packing up her brother's things, and Steve clearly likes Theo's taste in clothes. Betty pulls up a placemat Theo saved that revolves around the incredible Mr. Limpet, along with a photo of 2 kids, presumably her and her brother. While her and Jesse talk, Steve tries on Theo's skiing gear. When he asks Betty what she thinks, she begins to break down as he's a spitting image of a photo of her brother. As per her agreement with Nancy and Abel in episode 2, OA is sitting down with the FBI counselor, Elias Rahim. He starts by asking her how she feels, which OA takes as him wanting to know of her experiences.
For now, I'm just curious how you feel.
OA is angry and she feels like she's still a prisoner. Elias is very clearly not what OA expected, and she appears to be taken off guard by him. He assures her he's only there to help and not to make her feel trapped. She tells him that she's trying to help people and that he couldn't possibly understand.
Might be I do know in a way.
Still uneasy, OA tells him that she may come back the next day. That night, OA continues her story to the group. Back in their cells, her and the other captives start to formulate a plan to ensure they can stay awake through Hap's gassing. As they're talking, Hap comes in and has Prairie follow him to ask her about her most recent NDE, while he uses the heartbeat monitor to tell if she's lying. She tells him of her experience, excluding any parts about Katoon. After she gets back to her cell, she explains her plan to have Scott and Homer suck the gas out from both sides to ensure she can stay awake during her experiment. Scott refuses and reveals to the group that he was sick when he was taken.
Maybe you could be healed. She got her sight back.
She got hit in the head, Rachel.
Homer asks Rachel and Prairie if they'd be willing to inhale the gas, which they both agree to.
I don't even have to pretend to be blind.
The next time that the gas turns on in Homer's cage, Prairie and Rachel both stand on their beds to suck the gas out from his cell. They both pass out, as well as Homer. After Hap takes Homer, OA opens her eyes. Scott calls her out for not inhaling the gas.
Why don't you stand up and take a bow for your fans?
They find out that the gas doesn't just make you pass out, but it makes you susceptible to suggestion once you wake up. She explains that it took a year to get right, but eventually OA and Rachel were able to suck enough gas out of Homer's tank to allow him to get taken without passing out. After getting to the experiment, Hap locks Homer in a device with a large cylindrical dome over his head that has water pumped into it. This causes Homer's heart to race, which tells Hap that he's awake, so he manually gasses him. They come up with another plan to cause a ruckus shortly after Hap takes Homer, so he has to leave him to take care of it. Homer goes to Hap's office and sees several boxes of mini-discs labeled with each of their names. Homer takes one from his bin and starts to play it.
What's your name? My name is Homer. What? I'm Homer. Your name is not Homer. Look at me. Do you know Dr. Roberts? What? No.
It turns out Hap was repeatedly killing them. According to Hap's video recordings regarding someone who has experienced an NDE,
they have an almost limitless potential for being revived.
Additionally, Hap found a way to record the audio from someone's NDE. His ultimate goal is to map out what happens after death. Many tries, and several years later, Homer finally managed to stay awake through the experiment. He finds himself in a crawl space of a ceiling. As he crawls forward, a hand reaches up and starts to pat around for him. Prairie had told him to find something living and to eat it. He sees a spider, goes for it, but the ceiling he's in breaks and he finds himself in a men's restroom with urinals leaking a very bright yellow liquid. Not sure what's going on, but they definitely have some sort of plumbing issue happening. After grabbing a jacket, he starts to run around the facility, which appears to be some sort of hospital. Homer finds a room with a 5-sided aquarium,
5 by 5.
And as he's being pursued, he grabs a sea anemone and eats it whole. Back in his cage, he explains his experience to Prairie and tells her he doesn't think he got whatever it is that she did. Prairie explains that whatever it is that's inside her...
It's a name truer than Prairie, than Nina even. It sounds like away. Away.
As they speak, Homer falls asleep. Shortly thereafter, his hands begin to shake. Finally... So, let's ask this again. Is she lying? Between her most recent NDE as well as Homer's NDE, it's becoming more suspicious with the supernatural element. Regardless, we finally get why she calls herself OA. Also, if she's telling the truth, this episode shows the length she's willing to go through to help the other captives. She actually gave up being with her father in order to help them. This brings me to my next point. If she is telling the truth, then it confirms that her father is not alive. Back in episode 2, Prairie planned that trip to New York because she thought her father was alive. OA seeing him in her most recent NDE, as well as the fact that he looked the same as he did when Nina was a child, means that he did die when she was very young. Personally, I feel they should have gone into the emotional outcome of Prairie realizing this once she was brought back, although this could be another indicator that she might be lying. One final thing to bring up along these lines is how the captives are openly making plans, even though Hap might be listening in. Additionally, it's surprising that Hap doesn't notice OA and Rachel have both passed out each time he comes for Homer. I'm only going to mention it here as I have more to say about this in the coming episodes. Moving on, another aspect of this episode I love is how they show each of the Chosen Five interacting with each other. It's safe to say Steve would have never agreed to help Betty if they hadn't met OA. Just the simple fact that Steve and Jesse walking Betty to her car shows how much of an impact OA has had on their lives. Finally, I want to bring up the teenagers in this series. Many shows have middle-aged writers penning scripts for teens. The usual result from this is teenagers talking like they're significantly older than they actually are. In OA, however, Britt and Zell had stated that they've interviewed teenagers in order to get the writing for their age range to feel authentic. In an article on NBCNews.com, they reveal how they sought input from Ian Alexander, the kid that plays Buck, to ensure they're representing a trans teen as relatable to others. I feel the outcome is spectacular. It's not often that teenagers, when written by adults, actually feels authentic.
The girl makes Cadell look punctual.
Maybe there's a reunion in town or a Billy Joel tour or something.
Does anybody else feel like they've been Kaiser Sosate?
To me, the OA nails this. Going forward, there may be spoilers. If you want absolutely nothing spoiled, please close the video now. Otherwise, feel free to continue watching. When I first watched this episode, I found it odd that Homer finds a fish tank that exactly matches their cells. It wasn't until deep into part 2 that I realized why this is. Hap claims he built the underground lab himself. It's no stretch of the imagination to think that as Hap built his underground cage, Dr. Percy built that fish tank. Chances are they both got that 5-sided glass tank idea at the same time. So eventually we're going to talk about Elias Rahim. For now, I'm just going to say that he seems to know a lot more than he lets on.
I understand. Might be I do know in a way. I understand. More than you know.
So far, other than the Chosen Five, he really seems to be the only person who doesn't treat OA like she's disabled. One minor thing that has nothing to do with the plot, but I'm just curious as to who left the pink trench coat in the men's room. Yeah, it doesn't matter, but still, I'd like to know. Well, that's it for the OA analysis for episode 4. So, why was this script so hard to write? I think it's because the middle episodes can tend to drag a bit, and each episode needs to be experienced for the full effect. I think I'm just finding it hard to sum up the major plot points without giving in to spoilers. This episode in particular seems somewhat slow on the first viewing, and the events here are much more meaningful with knowing what's to come. Regardless, that will all come with due time. If you've watched this, thanks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Have a great day. Peace.